Chapter 46, Episode 46, Sunflower 1. Terms used in this chapter. MacGyver, the title character and protagonist of the American TV series, MacGyver. MacGyver is shown to possess a genius-level intellect, proficiency in multiple languages, superb engineering skills, excellent knowledge of applied physics, military training in bomb disposal techniques, and a preference for non-lethal resolutions to conflicts. New Year's Eve Bell. In Seoul, a popular event is the bell-ringing ceremony at Bosinggak Belfry on the New Year's Eve. People count down together to the new year, and the bell at Bosinggak Belfry is struck 33 times to celebrate the coming of the new year. Form is temporary, class is permanent. A famous sports quote from Bill Shankly: "It means that a player's form, physical status, recent performance is temporary and can change, but their class, natural abilities, talents, skills is permanent." I won't elaborate further about the quote, as it is mostly sports-related, but in this chapter, the quote is used to mean that even if the enemy is exhausted, their natural abilities are still there, they're still strong. Leviathan, the great monarch of destruction who drove Frost Anvil into ruins, summoned the giant white snake in his last-ditch move. Solid scales that bounced off any weapon of the ancient dwarves, a poison strong enough to melt the body just by being near, and magical eyes that paralyzed anyone it made eye contact with. The white snake was the fall of Frost Anvil itself. Countless ancient dwarves lost their lives. However, they didn't just die powerlessly. After driving the white snake into the deepest power room of Frost Anvil, they chose to die with the demonic monster. May our deaths be worth it. The ancient dwarves destroyed Frost Anvil's temperature control system by making the magical power furnace run away. As a result, Frost Anvil became a frozen land dominated by extreme cold, as its name implies. And 1,000 years later, the white snake had weakened in the constantly flowing passage of time. Its scales, which used to be an invincible shield, was no longer the same as it used to be, and its physical strength and mana had become so weak amidst its long hunger, and the coldness of Frost Anvil was also better than before. Because the Frost Anvil from 1,000 years ago was truly a hell of extreme cold. The ancient dwarves who made the power furnace runaway would have become ice sculptures without ever feeling any pain. White Snake, the demonic beast of Leviathan, the great monarch of destruction. The fall of Frost Anvil, a real monster that reached several tens of meters in length. But now it's just our experience. In front of the white snake with its partly destroyed head, Cordelia nodded and then stretched out her left hand as she started taking a selfie. It was a portable magic camera of the ancient dwarves that they had found along the way. And Jude said as he watched the scene, "What are you doing? Commemorative snapshot, do you want to take a picture together?" I knew it already, but it still feels new seeing you have a strong stomach in such a strange place. She was an incomparably beautiful girl who was pretending to be pretty and taking a selfie in front of a giant monster with a partially destroyed head. Nevertheless, the snapshot was important. Nodding his head, Jude quickly approached Cordelia and took a selfie together. "It came out well. From now on, I'll take it every time I defeat a boss." Well, what should I say? It reminds me of a poacher who kills a lion and poses on top of it. Wouldn't this be poaching when you look at it broadly? They killed a wild snake. Cordelia surprisingly agreed with him and nodded, while Jude was momentarily speechless before he just nodded his head. "Now then, let's go and eat." "Yes, Dad, what side dish are we having today?" "Snake side dish. It's always a snake. My princess, you can't be picky, okay?" Hey, eating only snakes every day is a rather unbalanced diet. It can't be helped, we only have a snake to eat. The monsters that existed between the 3rd and 6th floors were mostly humanoids like snow goblins. It was impossible for him to think of eating something humanoid, even if it was a monster, though he wouldn't know if he could do so when he had nothing else to eat. In the end, Cordelia had a long sigh, and as they walked towards the tent, which was their home, she asked Jude. Jude, when does the sunflower bloom?" "Tomorrow, it will bloom at exactly midnight today. A few days have already passed since they killed the white snake." At Jude's answer, Cordelia turned to look at the large flower located in the center of the power furnace. A sunflower with a completely closed bud. In the original story, the sunflower was literally a yellow and crimson flower, but now it was a purple that is close to blue. I hope it blooms quickly. Yeah. If you ate that, your Gyumjelmeek will be cured, right? Maybe I'll be almost cured, I think. Just be well. What are you going to do if I'm healed? We'll do everything that have been delayed then. Cordelia hummed and stepped faster as they got closer to the tent. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was more of a house than a tent, because Jude had added various materials that he had gathered up to this point to make the tent. Because there's a dining room and a bathroom. She didn't expect that Jude was really skilled with his hands. My nickname was the Korean MacGyver. Who is that? He is the main character of the classic American drama that foreign kids love. You must have heard of the song, right? Song? Tatala talatala tilde talala tilde talalalalalala tilde lalala tilde lalala tilde talala tilde talala tilde talala tilde. What is that? Oh, okay. When Cordelia's face became sullen, Jude, who was unconsciously absorbed in singing, opened the dining room door with an embarrassed look. Since the entire frost anvil was like a refrigerator, it was a kind of heated room built to preserve the warmth of food. Anyway, let's eat. Yes, Dad, it's not much, but enjoy your meal. Hey, I'm the one who set the table. So reflect on it, come to your senses, I mean, wake up. I'm dying from my illness. TN, these two like using puns. Charada can both mean set the table and come to one's senses. Jude meant the first meaning, but Cordelia jokingly interpreted it as the second meaning. So in the next sentence, Cordelia used gaxiong, which both mean come to one's senses, and awaken, wake up. And then Jude pretended that he was dying because he was losing his senses and no longer staying awake. And the puns doesn't end here. I'm dying from my illness could also be read as I would rather die than suffer, which is a Korean proverb. I won't explain the meaning of that proverb, as it doesn't make sense in their conversation. Well, their entire conversation was nonsense in the first place. The two exchanged nonsensical words as always, and they sat down facing each other on the table made by Jude and started eating afterwards. And that night, Jude and Cordelia squatted in front of the sunflower after having taken a nap in advance. The two, who had big and shining eyes, waited for the moment when the sunflower blooms. Not yet. It's about time, shall we count down? It's like I'm waiting for the New Year's Eve bell. Somehow, Cordelia spontaneously laughed as she looked at the seconds hand of Jude's pocket watch that he had taken out. Within a second, she opened her mouth again. 5, 4, 3, 2. The two counted down in a labored and brusque manner as they stared at the sunflower, and after they've counted to 2, they opened their mouths again and shouted. 1. The sunflower's bud opened. The violet petals gradually turned yellow, and the bud itself began to have a faint glow like that of the moonlight. Wow, it was beautiful. It couldn't even be compared to the blooming of tulips that she had watched all night long, because she had to write an observation journal in elementary school. As the faint light gradually became stronger, the sight was like a sunrise lighting up the surroundings. Beautiful. When Cordelia's bright eyes shined as she happily smiled, Jude saw Cordelia instead of the sunflower, and he also smiled. Good, this would be a great help in curing my Gyumjelmeek. Will you be eating that? To be exact, I'll be absorbing its energy. You've known it in the original story, right? I know, but it's somehow regrettable. The flower will wilt in 3 days just the same. Even so. The sunflower's blooming continued even during their conversation, and when it was finally in full bloom, the entire power room was filled with warmth. The flower of the sun. The essence of an extreme yang energy that rose in the extreme cold. Jude took a deep breath and walked towards the sunflower, while Cordelia stood up but stopped in her place and just stared at it. Cordelia. Yes. When I absorb the energy of the sunflower, I probably won't be able to move for a while. Should I doodle on your face? I'd like you to refrain from doing it if possible. Anyway, I'll be trusting you. You can trust in this Nunar, elder sister. I will keep you safe. As Cordelia thumped on her chest, Jude smiled and stretched out his hands toward the sunflower. I trust in you, Cordelia. Jude's 2 hands touched the sunflower bud, and at that moment, the yang energy of the sunflower converged in Jude's hands. The yang energy of the sunflower reacted to the extreme yin energy of the Gyumjul meek. The moment when Jude let out a hot breath and yelled, the light burst. The warmth of the sunflower penetrated into Jude's whole body once, and the blue and yellow energy mixed together and began to swirl in Jude's fallen body. The extreme yin and the extreme yang. It was a phenomenon caused by the extreme yin energy that gradually melted to the extreme yang energy that was pushed inside his body by the sunflower, and combined with the sun's necklace's yang energy too. Even if it looks dangerous, just leave it alone. It's the treatment process. Recalling what Jude had said, Cordelia nervously gulped as she stood in place and watched over Jude. Time passed, and it was around the time that the bored Cordelia had squatted and began to scribble on the floor. An alarm rang in her head. It was clearly the sound of the alarm, magic circle that Jude had installed in the several passages leading to the 7th floor. Cordelia's mind cleared, and she raised her head as she thought. Who could it be? They had clearly hunted down all the monsters that existed from the 3rd to the 6th floor. Was there one that was hiding? Or is it something completely unexpected? Now was not the time for her to worry. A new alarm went off. It was proof that it was approaching to this place. Jude! The blue and yellow lights were still mixing and swirling. She couldn't even guess when it would end. Cordelia closed her eyes once. She took a deep breath, and after a moment, she suddenly stood up and moved forward. Protect Jude. She would prevent whoever it was from even approaching the power room. Armed with the yellow work clothes of the ancient dwarves, Cordelia grabbed the moonlight. She began to run and follow the sound of the alarm. Farragut was not dead. All of the combatants and his colleague, Witch Vilke, died, but he was still alive. It was all thanks to his quick thinking at that moment. The moment the magical flames burst, he used Vilke as a shield and destroyed the magic circle with all of his remaining energy. After Vilke died, he absorbed her soul and remaining mana in the safety zone that he made with great difficulty. Of course, it was far from enough to fully recover his strength. Therefore, he also used the combatants who barely survived from the magic circle as his own nourishment. It's not the ancient dwarves. These weren't traps planned from the time of design, as those were usually camouflaged into the surrounding area. These were new traps made by someone who added magic circles into the area. Because Sisiath would have gone on a rampage outside the Great Gate, Farragut moved a little further inside. And then he found it. The traces of a fire. Traces were left everywhere of what seemed to be somebody camping. Leftover food scraps. Burnt firewood. A strand of long red hair found in a safety zone, constructed from various objects. Cuckoo and cuckoo. He involuntarily laughed. There was only one conclusion he could think of. He didn't know what methods they used, but Cordelia was already in Frost Anvil. After installing a trap on the 1st floor, they had moved deeper in search of the sunflower. Then there's only one thing that I have to do. Capture Cordelia. Kill Jude who was with her and absorb his strength. If the sunflower is in bloom, absorb it too. Farragut followed their trail. From the 3rd to the 6th floor. It was not easy to find his way in the cold and dark Frost Anvil. But Farragut was not in a hurry. After patiently moving for several days, he finally reached the 7th floor. And now they faced each other at this moment. Cordelia. He saw the image of a beautiful girl with bright red hair. Farragut laughed in satisfaction again. It was time to hunt. It wasn't as much as Jude, but Cordelia also knew a lot about Legend of Heroes too. So she could tell the moment she faced him. Demonic human Farragut. He was the strongest among the low-ranking demonic humans of the Devil's Hand. The cold air seemed to be a lie, as a cold sweat ran along her back. Apart from her knowledge, her instincts knew it, because her senses were telling her. He's strong. Jude and Cordelia had defeated 3 demonic humans so far, but in reality, demonic human Minos was the only one they properly fought. And even then, they wouldn't have been able to win against Minos without the help of Belastin's magic circle, a magic circle close to a cheat. How would she fight him now? It wouldn't be easy too. Even if he was a low-ranking one, a demonic human was still a demonic human. They were the devil's hand's tactical weapons, made by combining humans and demons. Moreover, the Farragut in front of her was stronger than Minos. He seemed quite exhausted in coming all the way here, but as the saying goes, class is permanent. However, she still had to fight. She must lure him away so that the aftermath does not affect Jude, who is stabilizing his body at the moment. Cordelia thought then on where they should fight. Farragut had a big build. On the other hand, Cordelia herself was slim. So why don't we fight in a place with many obstacles? She then rejected it. Farragut was a demonic human who boasted of a superhuman strength and was an expert in hand-to-hand combat. He could smash at once the light obstacles, and the cramped place would rather restrict her retreat. A spacious place. A place where Cordelia herself can make full use of her mobility. Cordelia didn't think. Instead of using reasoning like Jude, she used her intuition. And that's why it didn't take her a long time to make a judgment like Jude. At the moment her intuition worked, she started to move. All right. Farragut shouted loudly and kicked the ground. At the same time, Cordelia moved forward with haste, magic casted on herself. She had not yet used the witch transformation. If she had already used the witch transformation, which consumed a lot of mana, she wouldn't have the time to properly turn it off later. Ha, you're like a rabbit. Farragut's mana became stronger. Cordelia did not look back, but she knew. He must have grown horns on his head. It was the demonization that Minos had showed. A state when the demonic human has drawn out its true power. A chill ran up her spine while she was running. Farragut's powerful mana and malice seemed to be stabbing her back. Cordelia did not stop. Like a deer chased by a predator, she moved her feet endlessly. The map of the 7th floor. No matter how hard she tried, Jude was abnormal for having thoroughly memorized it. However, Cordelia could also remember to some degree a hunting ground that she had passed once. A large room in the corner of the 7th floor. She didn't know what it was originally used for, but it was a wide and spacious open area. She entered. It was dark, but the darkness didn't matter to her. And it was the same for Farragut. Ha, it's a dead end. Like a rushing tank that broke the ground, Farragut laughed aloud, and the brightness of his eyes shone even more. It was the eyes of the demonic human who saw through the darkness. Cordelia exhaled. Instead of being scared and cowering in vain, she activated the witch transformation. An intense mana wave rose in the air like a storm around Cordelia. Her hair was dyed black and her eyes glowed blue. Farragut's smile slightly cracked. It was because of Cordelia's mana, which exploded the moment she triggered the witch transformation. Bring it on, Cordelia said, and Farragut laughed again. He then rushed towards Cordelia at a terrifying speed. Boom! A loud noise broke out. The floor and walls were smashed. It was a mere difference. Farragut's fist brushed past Cordelia's side and carved a large crack in the wall, and Cordelia activated the haste magic again. A triple casting that overlapped on herself. Regardless of whether the body can withstand it, no ordinary wizard had ever attempted it. Their reason was simple. They couldn't adapt to the speed of a triple haste. It was a speed that was too much for an ordinary human. But Cordelia did. And she adapted to it. Pack. Cordelia moved at a tremendous speed. The physically adept demonic human Farragut also aimed for Cordelia by speeding up, but his attacks couldn't hit her. Cordelia wasn't just simply fast. She was reading Farragut's attack. How? They were in a high-speed battle. It was almost impossible to predict the next attack based on Farragut's own fine movements. And she couldn't do so, in fact. Even Jude wouldn't be able to immediately read the next attack in the fight against Farragut at the present moment. But Cordelia could, because she didn't calculate it from the very start. An intuition beyond reasoning. A talent to get immediate results. Cordelia felt it. Farragut's attack. She had a hunch as to what kind of attack would be carried out next. Boom, booms, boom. The heavy pressure crushed the walls, ceiling, and floor. Cordelia danced like a butterfly under the rushing pressure, like a storm. A breathtaking dance where she would likely be killed at any moment. If she allowed even a single blow, her small self would likely be crushed at that time. But Cordelia was not broken. She continued to dance like a butterfly in the storm. Foolish human. Farragut's mana became even more violent. And he thought, change tactics. If he can't hit her, then widen the scope of the attack. Even if it misses the mark, she will be caught up in the aftereffect of the attack. An attack to the side, not on a point. Cordelia felt it. And she interrupted Farragut in a way that only Cordelia could. Bang, bangs, 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 bang. A bee's sting was added between the butterfly's dance. In the midst of the breathtaking three-dimensional maneuver, a dozen magic missiles was added to the dizzying dance. Farragut's whole body was struck without mercy. Crazy. Farragut was astonished. It wasn't because of the magic missiles' damage. Are you saying that you used dozens of magic missiles at the same time as you dodged while fighting against me? She also didn't simply fire the missiles. Cordelia controlled the magic missiles. Farragut had goosebumps at that moment. A shudder rose along his spine. It was a crazy talent. Apart from being a quality sacrifice, Cordelia herself had an immeasurable value. If the girl continues to grow like this, if powerful mana is added to that combat talent that could only be called crazy, Kozuo, it was not the time for him to admire it. It sounded crazy, but Cordelia was getting stronger in the current battle. He materialized in reality, something that would only appear in a heroic novel. Gah! Farragut loudly shouted. It was sonic attack that overpowered all aspects. Cordelia's dance was stopped for a while because it was so effective. She faltered, and Farragut did not miss that opportunity. Die! He no longer thought about capturing her. His all-out blow struck towards Cordelia. It can't be avoided. Blocking it was ridiculous. Cordelia realized it. So she opened her eyes straight and faced the fist, but his fist just went through her. She had rushed past Farragut as if she was a phantom. How? Farragut did not understand. But Cordelia understood it. No, she was aiming for it in the first place. Because Jude was paranoid. Moreover, he was a rational person who valued efficiency very much. You will wear it. Jude couldn't move while he's absorbing the energy of the sunflower. It was much more efficient for her, the only combatant to use it. Fairy steps. Cordelia passed through Farragut and turned around beautifully. She stretched out her arms toward Farragut's empty back, and the remaining mana of the witch transformation was released all at once. Boodawam. The wave of red and clear mana swept not only Farragut, but also nearly half of the open area. The power was so strong that even Cordelia, who fired it, was greatly pushed back to a point. Cordelia managed to avoid sitting down, and she roughly breathed as her sweat dripped. A mixture of red air and dust clouds obscured the view. In addition, it was unreasonable for her to see in the dark now that the witch transformation had been released. But Cordelia could tell. So she closed her eyes tightly. Snowo. Farragut's whole body was covered in blood, and he yelled in anger. In the midst of being hit, he exploded his mana to offset some of Cordelia's attack, and somehow managed to endure and barely stand. He then rushed towards Cordelia and drew his fist. Smash! Crush that small body. Farragut madly felt pleasure in thinking of the time he'd stained the pure white snow. And Cordelia raised her head again. She smiled unconsciously. Boom! The wall was broken. Cracks spread not only to the wall, but also to the floor and ceiling because of the attack's terrifying power. And that was it. Cordelia was not broken. Farragut's fist pierced only the air. "I said I'd carry you, didn't I?" Cordelia's eyes widely opened to that shameless voice, and she finally laughed. She faced and hugged the neck of the man who held her in his arms. And what was activated at that moment? Ninth Heaven's 9 doors, second door. No further explanation was needed. Chapter 47, Ending Maker, Episode 47. Apparently, the series ended yesterday at 360 episodes, but the author said that they'll continue to post extra side stories for the series. The point of view of this chapter was a bit confusing, so I italicized Farragut's thoughts to make it more understandable, and I kind of made up Sisyph's true name, from what little I could understand from the Hangul. Jude Bayer, the second son of Count Bayer. He was the anguish of Count Bayer and was born into a famous family of warriors, but due to his chronic illness, he was unable to properly learn martial arts for the 17 years of his life. These were the facts that the Devil's Hand knew about Jude, and there was nothing wrong about these facts. That was why Farragut was unable to comprehend the current situation even more. How? A gale rose just before his fist struck. A gust of wind took Cordelia away. A footwork skill. A flurry that rose high and was by no means ordinary. And Jude Bayer had used it. He was the anguish of Count Bayer, the fiancé of Cordelia, and someone who was sick all the time and could not learn martial arts because of his chronic illness, yet he became a Gale and was able to save her. Did he hide his skills? Had he been hiding the fact that he could use martial arts? For what reason? What the hell would he gain from that? Generally speaking, there was only one possible reason. He had recently learned martial arts. He began to train in martial arts after he became fit enough to travel. It doesn't make sense. If I think about it, it was a couple of months at best. Are you saying that it is possible for a martial arts amateur to reach that level in just a couple of months? At the time when Farragut had fallen into confusion, Jude and Cordelia looked at each other instead of the demonic human who had lost his senses. It was impossible to properly see in the pitch-dark darkness, but nevertheless, the two could discern each other's faces clearly. For now, close your eyes. At Jude's words, Cordelia blinked her eyes. She wondered what his words meant. Normally, she would have understood it with her eyes, but it was so dark that understanding it was currently impossible. And no way. If she closed her eyes while she was hugging him. That isn't true, right? We're in the middle of a fight, right? That's just ridiculous, right? Cordelia's face turned light red as she tackled that in her mind, and she tried hard to keep calm before closing her eyes. And it was at that moment. Pa. Sharp, high-pitched sounds rang one after another, and the darkness of the room disappeared at once. The light pouring down from the ceiling was so bright that they lost their sight for a moment. Ah, my eyes. However, it was only Farragut who yelled and groaned. Cordelia had soon closed her eyes, and Jude was also prepared in advance because he had turned on the lights through the operation of a remote control. Azura! Farragut shouted angrily and wildly swung his fist randomly. Rather than an attack, it was a struggle to block Jude from approaching him. Instead of rushing to such a Farragut, Jude corrected his position of carrying Cordelia in the so-called princess hug, as he carefully observed him. And only then did Cordelia, who opened her eyes, said in a small voice, "Put me down." Not yet. He couldn't because Cordelia was exhausted. He had not yet figured out what Farragut could still afford to do. And you. At the same time he shouted, Farragut struck the ground and rushed like an angry bull. He rushed in a straight line. Cordelia instinctively crouched while Jude hugged her more tightly as he kicked the ground as well. 24 gale steps. The wind blew. A tiny but powerful whirlwind rose at the same time, and Jude became like the wind. Boom! Farragut's huge fist punched the innocent floor. Jude carried Cordelia while he ran from Farragut for a long time, stopping almost 10 meters away each time as he watched Farragut widen their distance to each other. Instead of moving efficiently by dodging enemy attacks with little movements, Jude maintained more than a certain distance from Farragut, even if it was somewhat wasteful. There were two reasons. One was to ensure the safety of Cordelia, and the other was, "You little rat." Farragut lunged at him again, and Jude became a gale again. And several attacks later, Jude had evaded all of it, or rather the expression "ran away" was more appropriate. He kept a considerable distance, as if they played tag. And at some point, "I'll put you down," Jude said to Cordelia, and she blinked her eyes. Cordelia was neatly curled up in Jude's arms so as not to fall, and Jude added in a whisper, "I think it'll work now." Jude had observed him enough. He had entered the pattern in his head. Even Cordelia couldn't immediately understand what Jude was talking about now, but still, she somehow felt relieved. Because the current Jude was reliable. She really thought that it would work if Jude had said so. Before Cordelia could even answer, Jude carefully put her down on the floor. Farragut saw them both. He clenched his fist again and kicked the ground. Cordelia looked at Jude. Jude smiled at such Cordelia. It was a reversal. Jude turned around and used the 24 gale steps again. But he didn't run away this time, he headed straight for Farragut. And Farragut's attack came to naught. The attack of Farragut itself was perfect. A straight punch loaded with superhuman strength. A simple but very quick, powerful attack. But Jude diverted it. With a little bit interference, he made the attack's direction deviate, as if he knew how the attack would stretch out. And it continued. Jude received all of Farragut's attacks. Not only did he evade and divert it, but he even stopped some of the attacks from even starting. How did he do it? It was a little different from Cordelia's sense. Cordelia instinctively sensed what kind of attack would come and immediately responded accordingly. She used her intuition on Farragut. Jude was different. He didn't rely on intuition like Cordelia. He anticipated it. There were clear limitations on the movements that humans with limbs could perform. Their individual habits also added to it. So a pattern was inevitably created. Moreover, Farragut was in a state of extreme exhaustion. Due to his injuries and fatigue, his attacks were simpler than usual. Therefore, Jude could anticipate the next attack. Farragut's next movement was caught and blocked in advance, as if he had run a simulation beforehand. It was something ridiculous. It seemed plausible, but it was extremely difficult to implement it in reality. But it was possible for Jude. Due to his Chunmujich and the opening and understanding of the second door in the ninth heaven's 9 doors, he made it possible. As a matter of fact, his excellent intelligence had gotten better. His computational power greatly increased. And Cordelia thought, while looking at such a Jude, Chunmujich is too much of a cheat. If Jude had heard of her thoughts, he would have shouted that her intuition to reach a result at once without any calculations was a cheat itself. He would also have appealed that his current actions were a result of calculating all possibilities, or that's what Cordelia had thought so. And Farragut further burst into anger. Allah. From Cordelia to Jude. Who the hell are these bastards? Why do these bastards with pretty and handsome faces even have battle talents that could pierce the sky? Farragut could tell because he directly fought them. Jude was also a monster. Like Cordelia, he was fearful of what Jude would be when he grew up. I must kill him now. Fortunately, he was not a complete monster yet. There was still a side that he could stab. Farragut gradually regained his composure. Little by little, he elaborately attacked from the front, forcing Jude to tenaciously block it as he aimed at vital spots such as the neck and solar plexus. Farragut made Jude focus his attention on him. He had Jude pay attention to the defense of his vital spots like the solar plexus. He made Jude forget about Cordelia and become fully aware of him. Because if Jude had done so, an opportunity would be created. Cordelia. Jude looked at Cordelia at that perfect moment. At the same time, Farragut also recalled the existence of Cordelia. It was for a moment, but the two simultaneously turned their eyes to Cordelia. And Cordelia's eyes blinked in front of the two. Hey, why me? Is there something on me? At her lightly dazed and innocent look, Jude frowned while Farragut manically laughed. How careless. Did you think your fiancé would be ready for a fatal blow if you turned your attention? Yes, I admit your talents. You are monsters. You are geniuses. But you're still young. You lack experience. You're not yet there. Farragut loaded all his remaining mana into his fist. He drew his fist in an attempt to kill the flustered Jude. And at that moment, when Farragut had truly and completely erased Cordelia from his head. It's fake, you idiots. In a quick whisper, Cordelia stretched out her hand hidden behind her back. In order to deceive the enemy, she had to deceive her ally too. Dark Blade. It was the witch's spell with a very simple name. But it was powerful. She had secretly prepared it during the deadlock between Jude and Farragut, and so, the spell flew like an arrow and penetrated Farragut's back. Kuzara! Farragut screamed at the horrible pain. And Jude also moved. As he displaced Farragut's fist, he poured out a series of attacks as swift as an arrow. Bangs, bangs, bang! He repeatedly struck Farragut's whole body with lightning punch and lightning strike fist. Seeing the staggering man after being hit in the chin, Jude drew his fist again. This time, it was the turn of the god's fist. The Holy Cross Punch. He struck Farragut's solar plexus. At the same time, Cordelia controlled the dark blade, embedded on him and then clenched her fist. Kala. The dark blade exploded inside Farragut. Not only did it tear apart his internal organs, but it even hit his spirit stone. Tua Allah. The Holy Cross Punch blew away Farragut to the opposite side as he ended up hitting the wall. He then collapsed to the floor, suffering from the attack's damage as he vomited blood afterwards. It was too much for him. The cracks that began from Farragut's solar plexus spread out to his whole body, and the tips of his limbs gradually became dust and disappeared. Ridiculous. He couldn't believe he was beaten by mere teenage rookies. He couldn't believe that even though he was a low-ranking demonic human, he was completely defeated. But it was only for a short while. Farragut soon acknowledged his death, and once again he burst into manic laughter. Cuckoo kuhahahata. He was dying. Now that the spirit stone was broken, there was no room for him to survive. But he wasn't alone. Cordelia and Jude would soon follow him in the end. You will die in despair and fear. Sisyth held his ground in front of the only exit, the Great Gate. The unsealed demon was waiting for them. The demon of the Blades, you. And at that moment, when they heard Farragut, Jude and Cordelia exchanged glances and spoke in unison. If it's the demon of the blade, is it Sisyth? Is that so? It's enough for us if he's on the level of a low-ranking demonic human. If it's Sisyth, it's wind attribute, right? Yes, he's a demon that specializes in melee combat and transforms both his arms into blades. Although Farragut was in the midst of dying, he unknowingly had a stunned expression. What? Did I ever mention Sisyth's name? Seeing that you didn't come together, did you release the seal? Release the seal? Oh right, he was sealed, right? If he's unsealed, he must have gone mad. What? Why do you know? How do you know the seal, and how do you know about the unsealed status too? It looks correct from his facial expression. If it's Sisyth, we won't be able to win with our current level, right? Normally, but if we reseal him, the chances of winning will increase. You need to know its real name to seal it. Yes, we need its real name. Farragut felt like his emotions disappeared, but he soon carelessly laughed again. Yes, one way or another, it doesn't change that Jude and Cordelia would die. But he was wrong. Typing in the air, Cordelia asked in a cheerful voice. Jude Wiki, what's the real name of Sisyth then? Junkathurgo Sijino Zervanston. Because he was one of the few demons whose real name was revealed in the game. In response to Jude's answer, Cordelia looked back at Farragut to confirm, and Farragut answered Cordelia's question with a look as if he was possessed by a ghost. Looks like it's right. Of course it is. I've thought about it before, but you're a bit like an uncle, you know. Farragut was unable to comprehend the current situation. What's going on? How do they exactly know Sisyph's real name? You know the sealing ceremony, right? I know. Why would you know that? But that was it. A crack spread all over Farragut's dying body, and Farragut left the world bearing a face full of questions. Shara. As Farragut's body turned into dust and scattered, several rings of light appeared around the bodies of Jude and Cordelia. 3 for Jude and 4 for Cordelia. In an instant, a bright smile spread over Cordelia's face. Last hit, I struck the killing blow. Are you happy? I'm happy. Cordelia answered with a giggle, before feebly collapsing like that. Because she really didn't have the strength to spare in standing now. My strength is gone. What, did you faint? Should I give you artificial respiration? Why would you give me artificial respiration, you crazy bastard? I'm still breathing, okay? At the laid down and panting Cordelia's response, Jude smiled and approached her. Make a choice. What? Should I give you a piggyback or just carry you in my arms? I mean, we have to go back for now. We must also take measures against Sisyph. And now that I'm telling you, I haven't completely absorbed the sunflower yet, okay? It was the truth. He had succeeded in opening the second door thanks to the sunflower's energy, but he had not yet absorbed all of the extreme yang energy. Is that okay? Well, the energy inside my body isn't going anywhere, so I can absorb it again later. And it can't be helped, right? Because our princess was in a dangerous situation. Sob, dad is the best. So what's your choice? Jude asked once again, and Cordelia gave an answer after a little hesitation. Chapter 48, Episode 48, Sunflower 3. Terms used in this chapter. Dolsui, one of the popular male servant names of the Joseon dynasty in Korea. It is often used in Korean traditional or historical dramas. Princess Maker, a series of life simulation games developed by Japanese company Gainax. In this fantasy game, the player raises a young girl daughter to adulthood, having her learn skills and gain personality attributes through attending classes and working part-time jobs. How she is raised will depend on the player's actions and will decide what ending she gets. The best ending, of course, is becoming a princess or queen. I feel like the author played this game so much because they have 2 series, Dungeon Maker, Ending Maker, with the Maker word in the title, hahaha. Ghostblade, this was previously translated as Sword Noble, which I thought was just part of Camel's nickname. However, I found out today that it is based on a unique class from the game, Dungeon Fighter Online. Because of that, all the previous translations with the words Sword Noble have now been changed to Ghostblade. Source, Dungeon Fighter Online Wiki. Pair annihilation. This is something physics-related and is a reaction that occurs when 2 opposing forces collide with each other, causing both to disappear and release energy. Yin and Yang are opposite forces' energies, so if these 2 are combined, it will cause total annihilation extinction. Giddy-ap, run. When Cordelia shouted cheerfully as she rode on Jude's back, Jude's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, what is it, Dolsui? Please be conscientious and give me some carrots before telling me to run. Carrot is bullsh *T. Rather than that, how about a whip? Don't you think I'll be good at it? At Cordelia's words, Jude momentarily imagined Cordelia using a whip. Though the outfit was a little tight-fitting, he felt that it was quite fitting for an incomparably beautiful girl. Hey, you're imagining something strange, aren't you? That's not true. Rather than that, my princess, this dad never raised his child to be like that. Then how did you raise her? Something like the Princess Maker. Congratulations, it's the queen ending. She is very good at whipping. The time has come for you to be punished for luxuriously enjoying the money your daughter got from the part-time job you made her do. We have returned. We are back. While they were exchanging their usual nonsensical conversation, they had arrived at the power room. Jude corrected his carrying posture again before asking Cordelia. Can you stand up? I can, but since we've come all the way here, please carry me to our lodgings. Okay. Though Cordelia was talking cheerfully, her complexion was pale. It was caused by her overworking herself. When Jude had a worried expression, Cordelia smiled and patted him on the back again. Let's go quickly, giddy-up. Jude danced to her tune and quickened his steps. And about a minute or so again. While lying down on the camp bed, Cordelia abruptly let out a small laugh. Why? No, it's just that I've stayed here for a few days, but I felt relieved as if I had come home. So you're a homebody, you were born with it, huh? I am. Cordelia giggled as she stretched her body once more, before forcibly closing her eyes. She couldn't easily fall asleep because the immediate future was too serious. Sissy, the demon of the blade, wind attribute, a monster that specializes in melee combat and is famous for being outrageously wicked when the seal is released. Originally, it was a demon that they met in the middle of the game when they directly confronted the devil's hand. But at the present moment, they were still early in the game. If they calmly looked at it, Sissyth wasn't an enemy that Jude and Cordelia could fight with. In terms of ability, they were still lagging behind Farragut. Out of the frying pan into the fire. They were able to defeat the white snake easily, but they now had to face Sissyth after Farragut. Jude said with a bitter smile as he consoled Cordelia. Even so, I know its real name and the sealing ceremony, or to be exact, the restriction control technique, so there exists a chance of winning. Moreover, if my guess is correct, there will be allies outside the door. Count H.R. Svelge. That's right, because if you considered the situation, Farragut must have destroyed the seal on the Great Gate. Count H.R. Svelge had installed a large seal on the Great Gate. In the original story, most of the monsters couldn't enter inside Frost Anvil because of the seal on the Great Gate. It was to the extent that some of them found a side road or a hidden road in order to come in. But this time, the situation was different from the original. The Devil's Hand, which originally should not have come and appear in Frost Anvil, had completely destroyed the seal on the Great Gate. If that seal is broken, the wizard would instantly know, because the seal is that important. I'm sure they'll send troops to investigate on what had happened here. Furthermore, this time, there was the incident of Jude and Cordelia's elopement. From Count H.R. Svelge's perspective, the possibility that Jude and Cordelia had destroyed the Great Gate's seal would also be considered, so he had no choice but to send troops one way or another. Cordelia's expression became serious at Jude's words. It was not because she was worried about being involved with Count H.R. Svelge again. The damage will increase if he sent a few rangers to investigate. Their opponent was the demon Sissyth after all. When Cordelia was worried about the possible casualties, Jude shook his head and said, "It's all right, I'm sure that Count H.R. Svelge would have realized the monster's abnormal movements. He would have dispatched more than a certain size of troops." "Is that so? That's a relief then." Cordelia smiled as she felt relieved, and Jude smiled with her too, but he had other thoughts inside him. The damage must already be significant. He must have dispatched 10 or so rangers together if it was over a certain size of troops. And on that scale, they wouldn't stand a chance against Sissyth. He could reasonably guess the high likelihood that more than 10 victims have already been reported. If they met Count H.R. Svelge's forces outside the Great Gate, they would be the second dispatched unit, and not the first one. However, Jude held back this thought to himself. He'd rather not disturb Cordelia's mind at the moment. Anyway, there is one thing that we need to do right now. As Jude deliberately spoke cheerfully, Cordelia was influenced by his cheerful words and smiled too. Is it about the preparation for that restriction technique? Yes, I have to do that too, but before that we have to finish the power-up. He hadn't been able to completely absorb the sunflower's energy yet. At Jude's words, Cordelia spoke and beat on her chest, though she was lying down. I'll protect you this time as well, trust in this Nunar. Yes, but this time you have to do it too. Me too, do I also have to eat the sunflower? Cordelia blinked her eyes, wondering what he was talking about, and Jude said after impulsively pinching her cheek. No, you're doing something else. What are you talking about? Cordelia thought as she then pinched Jude's hand that was pinching her cheek. It's the spirit stone of the white snake. If I had to give it a name, perhaps it's Snake Heart. It somehow looks weak for a snake heart, so let's just use spirit stone. Okay. Jude and Cordelia were looking at the red stone in front of the heart, located in the torso near its head, which was about 1/5 of the giant white snake's body. It was the spirit stone of the white snake that they had taken out of its heart. There's not much left as it had used up most of the stored mana for the past 1,000 years, but it's still the spirit stone that the demonic monster of Leviathan possessed. It would be very much helpful at Cordelia's current level. But in the original, wasn't it revealed that it can't be used? That's right, because it's the demon's spirit stone. Using the white snake's spirit stone was impossible for Lucas or anyone else. The demon's mana is poisonous to ordinary humans. Absorbing it can cause a major abnormality in the body, and in the worst-case scenario, they may become a demonic human and a demon's puppet. It's amazing every time you speak like that. Like, how can you recite all that? In any case, like what the lines of Companion A said, the spirit stone is generally not absorbable. That is why it didn't drop as an item in the game after all. But Cordelia, if I'm correct, you would be able to absorb it, because of the witch transformation. Cordelia nodded after completing Jude's words. She had often passed all the thinking to Jude lately, but that didn't mean she wasn't thinking herself. The power of the witch, which is the source of the witch transformation, originally came from the demons. If she used the witch transformation, it would be possible for her to absorb the spirit stone's power. But just in case, if you feel that something's weird, stop right away, okay? Yes, Dad, don't worry. Cordelia nodded her head after answering, as her hand then carefully touched the red stone, which was about the size of a human head. She could feel the strong mana pulsating inside. Okay, it might be difficult right now, but I'll try it as soon as I transform into a witch. All right, then I'll be going back to our lodging and finish absorbing the sunflower's energy. If it's within my expectations, I'll be opening my eyes again by tomorrow morning. So will your Gyumjulmeek be cured this time? I would like it if that happened, but maybe not. I had stopped midway, so I have to absorb it again. It would be better if I had done it all at once, but it couldn't be helped. Oh, that's too bad. Well, it would be closer to a state of being almost completely cured. So even if you want to hit me, just be patient a little more, my princess. What is this crazy bastard saying? Cordelia kicked Jude's ass, but he easily dodged it using 24 Gale steps. Then let's meet again tomorrow morning. Be strong and come back. Yes, ma'am. The two smiled and headed to their respective work. And that night, or more like at dawn when the morning approaches. After sitting cross-legged and reciting the mnemonic chant of the ninth heaven's 9 doors while he absorbed the sunflower's energy, Jude suddenly opened his eyes. He understood it. That was all that he could absorb right now. He could only absorb around 50% of the sunflower's energy. But thanks to that, more than 70% of his large and small meridians, which had been blocked by Gyumjulmeek, were finally opened. His lower abdomen that housed his inner kai became several times bigger than before, tripling the amount of inner kai that he possessed. And there was one more thing that he gained from this. A voice was heard in his mind, like the times when he got a title. Yin-Yang body. There were several unique physical constitutions in Legend of Heroes 2. There was Chunmujich, heavenly martial body, the manifestation of martial arts talent from the heavens. There was Ghostblade, the absolute talent of swordsmanship that Lucas and Camel possessed. There was Mambionsinch, innumerable illnesses body, a constitution that lets one understand innumerable illnesses, which the main character Maximilian was born with. Although the name was strange, the performance itself can only be described as crazy. I'm not 100% sure of Mambionsinch and what it is capable of. Personally, I interpret that understand innumerable illnesses part as him being immune to all diseases, because his body understands all diseases, thus giving him immunity. We'll just have to see in the future chapters if this is elaborated more. None of the playable characters were born with the yin-yang body physical constitution. However, if one expanded it to the entire Pleiades, there is one more person born with the yin-yang body. Archbishop Manuela. Landia's target and a powerful enemy who exerted a powerful influence throughout the entire Legend of Heroes series. Manuela freely handled both of the opposite energies, which a normal person could not use simultaneously. In particular, the Ultimate Extinction spell, which deals both yin and yang energies to cause pair-annihilation, was Manuela's signature spell, and one of the strongest magic in the Legend of Heroes series. Yin-yang body. A body that can freely handle the two opposing energies of yin and yang. Jude didn't know much about it right now, so he thought that it was necessary to study on how to use it first, but that didn't keep him from smiling though. Well, it's a trait that the final boss enemy has. And isn't it the unwritten rule of RPGs for the trait's characteristics of final boss class enemies to be too overpowered broken? This is good. Yin-yang body and Chen Mujich. He was a little sorry for Lucas, but acquiring the sunflower event was a rewarding outcome for him. Did Cordelia do well too? Jude became curious and quickly looked at Cordelia's camping bed on the other side, but it was no different from yesterday. It seemed like she had spent the night outside. Cordelia. Jude went outside as he repeatedly called her name, and afterwards he finally found Cordelia. But instead of continuously calling her name, his face went blank as he stared at her. She was at the spot where the sunflower bloomed. Cordelia was beautifully seated, as if she had replaced the sunflower. Her black hair fluttered like waves, and a soft blue light enveloped Cordelia's whole body. She looked at ease and had a small and faint smile on her face. She somehow reminded him of the witch's soul and the fairy queen, as her goddess-like elegance was unimaginable if it was the usual Cordelia. How many seconds has it been since Jude stared at her like that? The goddess opened her eyes. But instead of an elegant one, she spoke in a cheerful voice. Did you wake up? I woke up. When Jude answered rather awkwardly, Cordelia tilted her head, but she soon smiled and took a step after standing up. And at that moment, the witch transformation was released. Her hair color returned to a vivid red, and the blue light surrounding her whole body also dissipated. She was back to the usual Cordelia, or not. Jude could feel something different about her. Yes, something has changed. Cordelia also said it. Jude opened his eyes wide at the faded appearance of the spirit stone, which had rolled about when she stood up. Wait a minute, did you really absorb it all? Oh, it was a little difficult at first, but after some back and forth, it gradually became easier. As Cordelia answered with a faint smile, Jude blinked again. What is it? I feel like I'm seeing a cheat character. That's what I wanted to say though. No matter how you look at it, Jude's memory was a cheat. But Jude's words weren't wrong either. Cordelia was not only gifted in combat. Strictly speaking, the combat talent was from Cordelia's previous life, Yellow Storm's Hong Yoo-Hee. The Cordelia of this life was born with an overwhelming ability to adapt to mana. Thinking that these two talents were added, Jude had no choice but to imagine something similar to Farragut. How much of a monster will you become later on? Of course, the more she became a monster, the better for them. Because Cordelia is our monster. The convinced Jude nodded his head alone, and Cordelia said while knitting her brows. It seems like you're imagining something strange, so I won't ask. Instead, when are we leaving? We'll leave right away after having breakfast and a little rest. What about the restriction technique? I'll draw it after eating breakfast. At Jude's reply, it was Cordelia this time who looked strange. Why? I feel like I'm seeing a cheat character. Cordelia knew it because she was a wizard. The magic circles that Jude usually drew were not something one could simply draw if they had a good memory. Understanding it was also needed together with memorization. Even though he was not a wizard, Jude had understood all the complex formulas of the magic circles. Well, the more of a cheat character he is, the better for us. Cordelia weakly mumbled, and she nodded her head as if she was convinced. On the other hand, Jude laughed. Why? No, it's just, anyway, let's go and eat first. Yes, Dad. And that afternoon, after finishing their last meal at Frost Anvil, the two reached the first floor lobby. Chapter 49, Episode 49, Sunflower 4. Farragut thought that there was only one entrance to Frost Anvil, which is the Great Gate, but that wasn't the case. There were several dug holes. And in one of them, the moment they came out of the vent, Jude and Cordelia became nervous. The strong and rotten smell of blood irritated the tip of their noses. In front of the Great Gate, it was not an exaggeration to say that the bodies of many monsters had covered the entire snowfield. Fortunately, this was near Frost Anvil where the temperature was cold. If it had been elsewhere, they would have found it hard to breathe because of the rotting body's smell. And the demon stood there. Sisyth stood with his two-bladed arms hanging down, as if he was guarding the front of the Great Gate. On his skinny body, pitch-black shells were connected in succession, forming a shape that was like an armor. He remained motionless with his head slightly lowered, as if he fell asleep while standing. Although the restriction technique casted by the leader of the Devil's Hand had been released, that didn't mean that he was completely free. Until his consciousness damaged by the Devil's Hand was restored, he stayed around the Great Gate, bringing death to all those who faced him. And on his opposite side, as Jude had expected, there were some people who could be considered as their allies. Are they trying to seal him? Jude nodded at Cordelia's question. About a dozen meters away from the quietly standing Sisyth, 6 wizards wearing the robes of the Guardians of the Holy Cross were maintaining the seal. However, that was only buying them time. Moreover, even that time seemed to be running out. It's the flag of Count H.R. Svelga. Jude turned his gaze following Cordelia's voice and saw an outpost built some distance away. There were 4 knights of Count H.R. Svelga and around 30 soldiers. Instead of saying something, Jude closed his eyes once. Considering the general arrangements of Count H.R. Svelga's troops and the Guardians of the Holy Cross, it seemed that they had already suffered considerable damage, as he had expected. Let's join them. At Cordelia's words, Jude nodded. Technically, the Devil's Hand came here because of Jude and Cordelia. Of course, the two were also victims, so they did nothing wrong, but that did not mean they were free from responsibility. Hunt the demon. Knock it down. After all, it was a path they must pass in order to get to the perfect happy ending. And right at that moment, it's going to break, Cordelia abruptly said. Her intuition felt at that moment the slight change in mana. And right afterwards, Jude pounced on Cordelia. He pushed her down to the ground and made her lie down, and at that same time, the air let out a howl. Cordelia's intuition was correct. The space between Sisyth and the Guardians of the Holy Cross collapsed like breaking glass. The moment the invisible wall was destroyed, Sisyth swung his arm. One slash. A huge slash split the space. Get down, shouted someone from the Guardians of the Holy Cross. The knights moved and shouted too, but not everyone managed to react. 2 of the Guardians of the Holy Cross who were near Sisyth lost their heads. None of the soldiers lost their lives because of the distance, but most of them were terrified and couldn't move. The seal of the Guardians of the Holy Cross was broken. Sisyth began to move again. Out of all times, it had to be at this time. No, it was rather fortunate. If it had been before Jude and Cordelia appeared, everyone would have been massacred. Go, Jude said to Cordelia, who was under him. Cordelia responded, and Jude became a gale. 24 gale steps. Cordelia followed the whirlwind that Jude created, as she moved forward and unleashed the witch's power. Cordelia had activated the witch transformation. She had yelled out loud. Sisyth reacted with the destructive power of a demon. As he was about to deal a second slash, he turned to Cordelia, but a gale suddenly struck him. Demon Sisyth. He was not comparable to demonic human Farragut. His physical ability was truly a wonder itself. Sisyth saw Jude. His pupils turned into slits, like that of a cat, as his yellow eyes caught the sight of Jude. Haste! cried Cordelia. Sisyth wildly swung his second slash, and Jude evaded it at a close distance. The slash was so fast that without Cordelia's haste, Jude wouldn't have been able to avoid it. Haste. Cordelia casted haste in succession. Overlapping the use of haste was, in a sense, poison. Not only did it place a considerable burden on Jude's body, but it was also possible that, like everyone else, Jude would be unable to adapt to the speed that had become too fast. And it was true for Jude. Jude was not Cordelia. It was too much for him to adapt to the speed that had suddenly accelerated. So Jude calculated it. His own body. His movements. His speed. The trajectory he wanted to draw. Jude critically avoided Sisyth's attack. A smile spread over Sisyth's face, and Cordelia shouted again. Don't just watch. At the same time as her cry, she activated her magic. Dozens of magic missiles rushed like a storm towards Sisyth, and the guardians of the Holy Cross regained their senses at Cordelia's cry. They turned to each other and began to chant their spell. And Jude's Chimujit shined. Because of Jude's calculations, he was able to adapt to the speed that had gradually increased. Their operation was simple. Narrow the distance. Cordelia or the Guardians of the Holy Cross somehow slows down Sisyth's movement. And Jude himself will strike and thrust the restriction technique on Sisyth's body. Sisyth burst into a fiendish laughter and began to swing both of his arms simultaneously. Jude deliberately turned his back on the Great Gate, and more than 10 attacks slashed through the space where he had been, which then collided with the Great Gate. Karak. His slashes were so sharp that several deep lines were drawn on the thick and hard Great Gate. Jude held his breath. Even the movement of exhaling or breathing was a luxury for the current Jude. He focused and concentrated again. His understanding of the ninth heaven's 9 doors further developed with the opening of the second door, giving Jude a wider and more sensitive sense. The scary thing about Sisyth was the fact that his range of space-breaking slash was very vast. Therefore, it was rather bad to widen the distance. This is because if he deals space-breaking slash one after another, Jude wouldn't be able to avoid it. So Jude must fight at a close distance. He must create a situation in which he can avoid Sisyth's attacks one at a time. The spell of the Guardians of the Holy Cross was completed. Dozens of golden chains stretched out towards Sisyth. Sisyth used space-breaking slash again. He rotated his body and split the space several times, breaking the golden chains. But that was enough for the two. Because Sisyth had turned around, because he had attacked somewhere other than Jude. It was just a moment. It was too short a time. But there was someone who squeezed into that short time. Cordelia's dark blade cut through space. It flew at the right timing and penetrated Sisyth's blind spot. An explosion occurred. It wasn't Cordelia. It was the result of Sisyth exploding the mana surrounding his whole body. The air shook, Cordelia's dark blade was crushed, and the Guardians of the Holy Cross and the soldiers standing far away were unable to withstand the aftermath and fell down. Cordelia clenched her teeth. The moment the dark blade was crushed, she withstood the rebound of mana and completed another magic. It was the power she gained from absorbing the spirit stone of the white snake. It could only be used at the moment when the eyes of her and the opponent met. Their eyes met. Because Sisyth had crushed the dark blade. Because the demon's mana detection identified who threw the dark blade. It was as she desired. As soon as her eyes met with Sisyth, Cordelia's blue eyes turned like that of a snake. She activated the evil eye, a power which the white snake once possessed. Allah! Cordelia screamed. Blood trickled down from both of her eyes, but Cordelia did not close her eyes. She forced herself to endure it. And the result was that Sisyth stopped. For a very short moment. However, it was infinitely long compared to the moment when Jude turned around to deal a blow. A whirlwind. There was a gale. A golden flash of light rose from the power fist, covered with a sheet of paper, inscribed with the restriction technique. Junka Thurgo Sigino Zervanston. said Jude as he recited that very long name. Jude's fist reached Sissyeth's chest. Cordelia eventually closed her eyes. She collapsed, covering her eyes with both of her hands. But nothing happened to Sissyeth. Jude had a bewildered look. Why is it not working? This should work. As he tried to figure out why it didn't work, Jude spread out his palm. He raised his palm to the golden-colored restriction technique engraved on Sissyeth's chest and shouted again. Junka Thurgo Sijano Zervanston. Allah! Sissyeth screamed. The golden light engulfed him, and the terrifying mana he had on his entire body shrank in an instant. Jude swallowed his breath. He shouted as he pulled his fist. Cordelia! The Holy Cross punch exploded on Sissyeth, and he couldn't respond properly because it was right after the restriction technique bound him. Sissyeth's jaw turned to one side, and Jude used the lightning punch in succession. It struck Sissyeth's whole body, and Jude cried once again. Cordelia! He called her. And Cordelia responded to him. With her eyes still closed, she stretched out her hand. While she was in the witch transformation state, Cordelia's ability to detect mana was comparable to a low-ranking demon, even though it was still underdeveloped. She sensed the mana. She thrust it into the mana that she sensed there. The dark blade cut through space again. It penetrated into the back of Sissyeth, who was being beaten up into a mess. Kuzara! Sissyeth let out a shriek, and Jude pulled both of his fists. His next move was based on the Holy Cross punch. Make a Holy Cross in both hands. Overlap the two Holy Crosses to raise the power more than twice. Double Cross punch. The attack was great, but it didn't stop there. Just like Cordelia, Jude also used his newly acquired power. Yin and Yang. On his right hand, the Holy Cross emitted Yin energy. On his left hand, the Holy Cross emitted Yang energy. Jude's two fists struck Sissyeth's chest. Two crosses penetrated his body, opposing each other as the two collided before finally exploding. It was not comparable to Manuela's ultimate extinction spell, but the two energies of Yin and Yang collided with each other, creating a more destructive power than the double cross punch. Dark. Jude wasn't uninjured either. Both of his arms became hot red as if he was burned, and a streak of fresh blood flowed down his lips. But that was enough. Sissyeth no longer moved. A ring of pure white light surrounded Jude and Cordelia. Did we kill him? Did I deal the last hit? Cordelia was still sitting with her eyes closed, fumbling in the air as she asked, and Jude wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth and counted the rings of light. 5 for Jude himself and 4 for Cordelia. However, Jude was a man who knew how to tell a white lie. Oh, you hit it, you got the last hit. Nice last hit. It made her happy. Jude felt a strange sense of déjà vu as he saw the appearance of Cordelia feebly collapsing with a happy face, and he looked back. If he could, he wanted to appreciate the newly acquired title, but he had to prioritize handling something first. That something was the Guardians of the Holy Cross and the Knights of Count H.R. Svelga. As he expected, they had mesmerized faces when he saw them, and one of Count H.R. Svelga's knights suddenly exclaimed, "Jude Bayer, Cordelia Chase." Jude nodded his head. It was just as the knight said. He was thinking of revealing their identities first before talking to them. But the knight's words weren't over yet. Crazy, no, it's not that, it's fantasy couple. Tien, there's a pun here. The knight was about to say Hwan Jangyuai, which means crazy. However, what he wanted to say was Hwan Sangyuai, which means fantasy, so he mixed up the Jang and Sang in both words. This pun continues in the conversation of the knights after this note. Gasp, for real. They're the very crazy couple. Fantasy, it's fantasy. The young master warned us to be careful with those words. Our fantasy, yes, fantasy. What the hell was their conversation? And is Lucas the young master they're talking about? Lucas, what the hell did you say to them? And crazy couple, what is that? You warn them to be careful about it, because they got confused too often. Ahem, my name is Phil Reinur, Count H.R. Svelga's knight. One of the knights who seemed to be their leader came forward, and then a woman from the side of the Guardians of the Holy Cross, who quickly came to their senses, also spoke to Jude. "I'm Joan from the Guardians of the Holy Cross." Phil Reincarnated was a big knight who looked to be in his early 30s, and Joan was a woman in her late 20s, with such gorgeous golden hair that it was disappointing for her hair to be just short. "As you know, I'm Jude Bayer. I'd like to talk to you later once I take care of my fiancé first." There were also victims on the side of the Guardians of the Holy Cross. All of their groups needed time to settle things first. Jude ran to Cordelia, and one of the knights who saw them spoke again. "A couple of the century who would die if they cannot live with each other. That's what the young master said. It's just as the young master said." "Lucas, what the hell did you say to them?" Jude only looked forward as he repressed the urge to look back, and soon, he saw Cordelia covering her face with both hands and expressing her embarrassment with her whole body. Chapter 50, Episode 50, Fantasy Couple. Dad is now daddy. Someone pointed this out, and daddy does make more sense than dad in the context of this chapter because of its childish and sexual connotations. Northern Barbarians' Great Attack. I changed attack to invasion as it was an invasion and not just an attack. After defeating Sisiath, the story went as Jude had expected. First was the reason why the Guardians of the Holy Cross and Count H.R. Svelga's knights were here. The Guardians of the Holy Cross had detected the awakening of the demon and thus dispatched some of their troops. As for Count H.R. Svelga's troops, they were the second unit dispatched after the annihilation of the first unit that was dispatched first, as Jude had predicted. We entered Frost Anvil to obtain the Sunflower and were attacked by the Devil's Hand, but we were able to get the demon's real name and the restriction technique from them. These were the things they used to control the demon. It was Jude's smooth response to Joan's question on how he knew the real name and the restriction technique. He did not forget Count H.R. Svelga's knight either. "I apologize that we've caused a lot of trouble to Count H.R. Svelga. We obtained the Sunflower and my illness has improved, so we'll be going to Count H.R. Svelga ourselves to talk about what had happened and ask for his forgiveness." Phil Reincarnated just nodded his head at Jude's words that he said effortlessly again, because he had nothing else to say to Jude. After all, they were not the knights who were looking for me and Cordelia. From Phil's standpoint, Jude and Cordelia were their benefactors who suddenly popped out and saved them. He was just grateful and had no such dissatisfaction towards them. So he was just thinking of finishing things up and going back to Thunderdoom, as he really didn't have any idea on what to do with Jude. But Joan seemed to have different thoughts. "Mr. Bayer, would you like to come with us?" It was an invitation to the Guardians of the Holy Cross. In the original story, it was an event that occurred after being involved with the Guardians of the Holy Cross several times, but Jude shook his head for the time being. Going to the Guardians of the Holy Cross is good, but we have to do something about the Northern Barbarians event first. They also had to save Lena. I think we should visit Count H.R. Svelga first. I would be handing over the restriction technique that we got, so I'd like to postpone our visit to the Guardians of the Holy Cross for now. "I see, our side will contact you again then," Joan said with a look of regret, and with that, their talks were over. "Then I will go back to take care of my fiancée, Lady Cordelia. You said that the departure is on the morning the day after tomorrow, right?" "Yes, that's the plan. Although you've already told us some things, we still need to do some investigation ourselves." "I understand, then I'll be going back. Have a good night." After finishing his words with a smile, Jude left Phil's tent. The morning on the day after tomorrow. It wasn't bad, rather it was even a perfect time. Jude nodded alone as he looked inside the tent. There was a new tent added to the several existing large tents set up here. But I'm glad, because none of the soldiers were dead. Although there were some victims from the Guardians of the Holy Cross, it was good to say that they did quite nicely in fighting against the enemy. Of course, listening to their story, the sacrifices were already significant. Particularly in the case of the Guardians of the Holy Cross, 6 out of 9 died, and only 3 survived, as many people died while trying to seal the movement of Sisiath. However, it could be said that they were still fortunate. When Sisiath went on a rampage in the original story, dozens of people from the Guardians of the Holy Cross and nearly 100 soldiers died. Hulu. But counting people by number also made him feel bitter. Jude thought of the old days for a while, sighing before he headed to the tent where Cordelia was waiting. "Is that you, Daddy?" As soon as he entered the tent, he heard Cordelia's cute voice. She was lying down on a camp bed with a bandage around her eyes. Jude reflexively looked around before saying in a small voice, Hey, what are you going to do if it's not me?" "What am I going to do? You'll be rumored to be a pervert who makes his fiancée call him Daddy." Wouldn't that be bad for both of our reputations?" I'm kidding, I knew that it was you." "How? Just by feeling." "That's quite consoling." As Jude spoke with a sour face, Cordelia burst into a giggle. "Anyway, did you have a good conversation?" "Yes, I did well. Rather, are you all right?" "I'm all right, I'll be all right. The Guardians of the Holy Cross also took a look at me earlier, and they said it's just a little strain." The white snake's evil eye. It was Cordelia's newly acquired power in Frost Anvil. Even though it was a low-ranking demon, it was powerful enough to overpower the demon who was at its peak and running wild. But still, later on, if Cordelia's mana becomes stronger, she could use it without difficulty, but for now, it was too much for her. Moreover, it was a skill that causes strain not only to her eyes, but in other parts of her body too, so he couldn't help but get worried. "Don't overuse it." "Oh my goodness, are you worried about me?" "Yes, I'm worried." As Jude's voice became serious, Cordelia's lips cringed for a moment before she snorted. "HMPH, the sun will rise in the west tomorrow." "Hey, isn't your face red now?" "No, it's not red at all." While saying that, Cordelia lightly touched her cheeks. Jude smiled a little again before he approached Cordelia's side. Then Cordelia, who felt his presence, suddenly sat up and fumbled in the air as she said, Jude." "Yes." "Come over here and hold my hand." "Hand?" "Yes, my hand." Jude wondered on what was going on all of a sudden. However, Cordelia's expression was quite serious, so Jude approached without complaint and grasped Cordelia's hand. "I'm holding it." "Yes, I caught it, you bastard." Cordelia suddenly raised her voice, pulled Jude's hand, and she began randomly hitting Jude with her empty left hand. Hey, it hurts, it hurts." "It hurts when I hit you. Hey, did you think I wouldn't know? You're the one who got the last hit, right? Endo. No sh*t. Even though she couldn't see, her combat sense remained, so Cordelia hit him exactly where it hurts. How? Because the feeling was vague. Feeling? Yes, there's a unique feeling when I get the last hit, but it wasn't there. At Cordelia's words, Jude's face became blank. Feeling? He couldn't believe she noticed it, just because she didn't have that unique feeling she usually got when she dealt the last hit. Cordelia, you. What about me? Are you an animal? Are you not a human? Woof, woof. Cordelia barked like a dog and hit Jude more, and Jude was convinced. He didn't know if there was anything else different, but he was sure that Cordelia's instinct was on the level of an animal. Moving on, there is one more thing I wanted to say. Cordelia said, having been tired of hitting him for some time, so she lightly stretched her shoulders and let go of Jude's hand. Jude quickly removed his hand in reflex before he asked, "What is it?" "Don't do that from now on, and don't even think about giving up the last hit." Cordelia. Because it's a real fight at stake. Defeating the enemy is definitely more important than anything else. Do you understand? Okay, I understand. Jude nodded at her unthinkable maturity, and Cordelia laughed again. Of course, that doesn't mean that I will give up aiming for the last hit. I will gain it with my own hands. The way she grinned and clenched her fist was very charming. As Jude unknowingly stared at her blankly, Cordelia pretended to notice something with her unique feeling again. Why, did you think that you fell in love again? No, I never fell in love in the first place, though. Yes, Daddy, if you insist. Cordelia laughed as she lied down before continuing her words. What happened to your talks anyway? They said we would be leaving in the morning the day after tomorrow. Then we'll have to run away tomorrow night at the latest. That's correct. They couldn't go back to Count Hr. Svelga now, even though he had sweet-talked in front of Phil. The Great Invasion of the Northern Barbarians. There were still a couple of months left until the start of Jude's main scenario, but it would be too late to wait until then. Jude and Cordelia were going to twist Jude's main scenario, the Northern Barbarians' Great Invasion, from its very roots. We can do it. At this point, intervention was still possible. The development of the main scenario was as follows. A land of barbarians existed across the border, guarded by the jackdaws. The barbarians who lived there weren't actually one. They were divided into dozens of large and small tribes, among which there was a tribe called Angry Bull. A tribe that is neither weak nor strong, and whose power is just in the middle. On a blizzard day, a prophet covered in rags visited the Angry Bull tribe and said, "A great king will come from the Angry Bull. He who will be king, receive the power of the Great One and sweep the world." The chieftain of the Angry Bull tribe accepted the words of the prophet with a mysterious power as correct and prepared the requested ritual to receive the power of the Great One. It was a story where the Angry Bull tribe that had grown so strong unified the barbarians under one leadership and moved southwards, right? Yes, the prophet was a demonic follower, and starting from the Angry Bull tribe, all of the northern barbarians were corrupted by the power of the demon. It was such a story. Even in the whole Legend of Heroes 2, it was a very important event. Not only did the invasion brought down the northern borders of the Len Kingdom and killed countless people, but it also sprawled demonic followers in every corner of the world. The Devil's Eye. They were the group of demon followers who were behind the prophet. If the Devil's Hand served Asmodeus, the great monarch of lust, the Devil's Eye served Belial, the great monarch of corruption. I've been thinking about it in the past, but don't you think the names of their organizations are too roughly named? You're not the only one who feels that way. Because it wasn't just the hands and eyes of the devil. Among the groups of demon followers that will appear in the future, there was also the devil's mouth and the devil's horns. Regardless, the best way is to prevent the invasion itself. In other words, we prevent the unification of the barbarians itself. Yes, that's correct. The barbarians had to be unified first before they could invade. And the way to prevent the barbarian invasion was simple. We need to create an opposing force that can compete against the Angry Bull tribe. It's quite simple. Well, if you start from zero, attempting it would honestly be difficult, but you also about know that, right? The fact about the unfortunate hero. Red Wind's father. Red Wind was the only barbarian among the playable characters. Red Storm, her father and the chieftain of the Great Storm tribe, was an outstanding hero who was not corrupted and resisted the demon's temptation to the very end. In the original story, he faced a tragic death when he was still alive. So they needed to keep him alive. They would make him stand tall as the hero of the barbarians, who would confront the corrupted barbarians. If we succeed, we will be able to drastically change the flow of the original story. That's exciting. Just imagining it was quite satisfying. Moreover, they also had a very desperate reason this time. Because if it followed the original story, my father and her father will die in the Great Invasion too. Count Bayer and Count Chase. Jude recalled the two people for a while, especially Count Chase's face, and he clenched his fist. We must save them. Yes, we have to save them. We will be able to save them. When Cordelia nodded with a bright face, Jude suddenly grasped Cordelia's hand again. In order to do that, there is something that is absolutely necessary. What is it? Is it something that we can do by holding hands? No, it's not that. Jude withdrew his hand and brought his face closer instead as he said, "To save Red Storm, we must cross the border and head to the land of the barbarians. I know, in order to do that, we must meet Red Wind, who had secretly went south in search of a drug to cure Red Storm's illness." Cordelia answered as she slightly moved her head away from Jude, while Jude immediately continued. Yes, so in order to do that, we have to get out of here first. At this point, Cordelia had no choice but to notice it. what Jude was trying to say to her. Or rather, what Jude was claiming to be necessary now. Wait. Yes, wait. You need a letter now, don't you? We can't just vanish into thin air, right? We have to leave a story about being healthy after eating the sunflower. Okay, good, up to there I can understand, but this time I don't necessarily have to be the one to leave it, right? Well, that. Besides, I've already left a record, right? Ahem, it's just as you say. As Cordelia had said, it was not necessary for her to leave a letter. Actually, your reputation is almost established and irreversible already. What? No, it's nothing. With a shameless smile, Jude said to Cordelia, who tilted her head. Well then, shall I write it this time? Yes, you must write it, okay. Well then, I'll write it this time. Hee, how exciting. He should try it too. Cordelia smiled so brightly, and Jude shrugged with a poker face. And the day after tomorrow. As planned, the two had escaped from Count H.R. Svelga's camp and stopped for a moment on a snowfield devoid of other humans. Good, in a little while people will find the letter, right? Yes, they will. It was a letter from Jude. The contents were as follows. Dear Lord Lucas, I will further continue my honeymoon trip with Lady Cordelia, whom I dearly love more than my life. Please do not worry too much, because I've gotten healthier from eating the sunflower. We are also very sorry to have troubled Count H.R. Svelga because of our reckless behavior. P.S. I am really happy now. As Jude recited the contents of the letter with a wretched face, Cordelia excitedly jumped from her spot. So good, it's so much good. Is it so much good? It's so much good. Well, I didn't know that you love me so much. What is this crazy bastard saying? TN pun again, Jotar, can both mean good nice and in love with fond of. Well, moving on, if the madam is satisfied, this Dolsweet is simply happy. There is a long way to go, so let us hurry up. Jude, who had spoken so far in a splendid acting like that in a play, began to take the lead afterwards. And Cordelia thought as she looked at the back of such a Jude. Something isn't right. It was what Cordelia herself had expected. Aren't you coming? I'm coming. Cordelia yelled at Jude, who was already far ahead, as she pouted her lips before hurriedly stepping forward. Hello.